Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping into the octagon of history, where blood, business, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu collided to create the most controversial sport in America. Drop your city and local time in the comments if you're still awake out there. Now dim the lights, maybe grab a drink, and let's walk together into the brutal, beautiful, and utterly insane story of how a family secret from Brazil changed fighting forever. You're standing in McNichols Sports Arena in Denver, Colorado on November the 12th, 1993. The air smells like stale beer, cigarette smoke, and something you can't quite identify but suspect might be fear mixed with testosterone. Around you, 2,800 people are packed into folding chairs, most of them expecting to see some kind of circus act. They have no idea they're about to witness the birth of a revolution that will turn a gentle Brazilian's family teaching into a billion-dollar empire. Your ticket cost you $25, which in 1993 money feels like betting on whether aliens exist. The promotional material promised no rules, no time limits, no judges. Basically everything your mother warned you would happen if you hung out with the wrong crowd. The octagon sits in the centre like a gladiatorial cage designed by someone who clearly skipped geometry class. 8 sides, because apparently circles were too mainstream and squares too boring. You notice a skinny kid in a white jai wandering around backstage, looking like he accidentally wandered into a motorcycle rally while searching for his karate class. This is Royce Gracie, weighing in at a whopping 175 pounds of what appears to be concentrated confidence and family secrets. He's about to prove that size matters about as much as a participation trophy in actual combat. The other fighters tower over him like skyscrapers next to a food truck, but there's something in his eyes that suggests he knows something they don't. Art Davey, the advertising executive turned fight promoter, paces nervously near the production tables. His brilliant idea to determine the ultimate fighting style is about to either make history or land him in federal prison. The concept is beautifully simple and terrifyingly stupid. Take fighters from different martial arts backgrounds, throw them in a cage and see who emerges with their consciousness intact. It's like a deadly version of rock, paper, scissors, except rock might actually concuss you. The production budget is tighter than your jeans after Thanksgiving dinner. The whole event costs less than what modern UFC fighters spend on their walkout music. Camera operators are literally learning their jobs as they go, which explains why some of the most historic moments in combat sports history look like they were filmed during an earthquake by someone with severe allergies. Gerard Gordeau, the Dutch kickboxer with teeth that could double as piano keys, stretches in one corner. He's here to prove that European kickboxing reigns supreme, unaware that he's about to become a footnote in someone else's story. Taylor Tooley, the sumo wrestler whose fighting stance resembles a refrigerator with anger issues, prepares for what he assumes will be easy money against smaller opponents. The television production crew from Semaphore Entertainment Group scrambles to make sense of what they're about to broadcast. Pay-per-view is still a relatively new concept, like ordering pizza through your television, except the pizza might give you nightmares. They're charging $14.95 to watch something that has never existed before. Live unscripted violence with actual consequences. You can feel the energy in the arena shifting as fight time approaches. The crowd doesn't know whether to cheer, pray, or call their lawyers. Local athletic commissions are notably absent because nobody knows how to regulate something that technically isn't boxing, isn't wrestling, and definitely isn't anything their rulebooks ever contemplated. It's sporting anarchy with a referee who seems as confused as everyone else about when exactly he should intervene. What you're witnessing is the collision of ancient fighting traditions with modern American showmanship, and the result will reshape how the world thinks about combat sports forever. You're backstage now, watching Rory and Gracie prepare his younger brother Royce for what might be either the family's greatest triumph or their most public humiliation. The smell of liniment and nervous sweat fills the cramped preparation area, which looks like it was repurposed from storing hockey equipment. Rorian's hands move methodically as he tapes Royce's wrists, but his eyes carry the weight of a decision that could destroy everything his family built in America. The Gracie family secret isn't really a secret. It's a philosophy wrapped in technique, seasoned with decades of street fights in Brazil, and served with a side of unshakable confidence. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu as they prefer to call it, assumes that every fight will end up on the ground. While other martial arts dance around like they're auditioning for action movies, BJJ gets comfortable in the dirt, the sweat, and the uncomfortable intimacy of human chess played with limbs. Rorion knows that if Royce loses early, their family's American dream dies in front of a pay-per-view audience. They've invested everything in this moment: their reputation, their teaching methodology, and their claim that technique can overcome size, strength, and raw athleticism. It's like betting the family farm on a theory you learned from your grandfather, except the farm is a growing martial arts empire, and your grandfather happened to be a Brazilian genius named Helio Gracie. The genius of choosing Royce over his larger, stronger brothers isn't lost on you as you watch him stretch. Royce looks like he could be easily mistaken for someone's accountant who accidentally wandered into a fighting tournament. But Rorion understands marketing psychology better than most Madison Avenue executives. If the biggest, meanest Gracie brother wins, people will credit genetics and physical gifts. If the smallest one dominates, they'll want to learn the system that made it possible. You notice how Royce moves differently from the other fighters. While they're shadowboxing and pumping themselves up like they're preparing for war, he's methodically going through movements that look more like yoga than fight preparation. His breathing is controlled, almost meditative, as if he's about to take a relaxing bath instead of potentially getting his face rearranged by men twice his size. The television monitors scattered around the backstage area show the early fights beginning to unfold. Gerard Gordeau's kickboxing background serves him well, as he demolishes Taylor Tooley with a kick that sends the sumo wrestler's tooth flying into the front row like a disgusting souvenir. The crowd roars with a mixture of excitement and horror that suggests they're not entirely sure what they signed up for when they bought tickets. Art Davey pops his head into the preparation area, his face a mask of barely controlled panic disguised as promotional confidence. The early fights are going according to plan, which in this case means complete chaos that somehow looks organised enough for television. He needs Royce to at least make it past the first round to validate the tournament's credibility. What he doesn't know is that he's about to get far more than he bargained for. Rorion whispers final instructions to his brother in Portuguese, words that carry the weight of family tradition and revolutionary potential. You catch fragments of strategy that sound more like philosophical advice than fight tactics. This isn't about winning a tournament, it's about proving that intelligence can overcome brute force, that technique can defeat athleticism, and that everything the martial arts world thinks it knows about fighting is fundamentally wrong. As Royce stands up to make his walk to the octagon, you realise you're watching the moment when ancient Brazilian wisdom meets American pay-per-view spectacle, and the result will change everything. You're walking behind Royce Gracie as he makes his way to the octagon, and the energy in McNichols' arena feels like electricity mixed with curiosity, and a healthy dose of bloodlust. The crowd doesn't know what to make of this slight Brazilian in his traditional white GI, walking calmly toward a cage designed to contain violence. He looks like he's heading to a meditation retreat, not a fight that could permanently rearrange his facial features. His first opponent is Art Jimmerson, a professional boxer whose credentials include victories over legitimate contenders and a left hook that could relocate your consciousness to next Tuesday. Jimmerson enters the octagon wearing a single boxing glove, apparently under the impression that this will provide some tactical advantage in a no-holds-barred fight. It's like bringing a fork to a soup kitchen, technically a utensil, but missing the fundamental point of the exercise. The referee, Big John McCarthy, towers over both men like a confused giant trying to moderate a debate between different species. He's been given minimal instruction on when to stop the fight, essentially told to intervene when someone is either unconscious or expressing their desire to discontinue participation in increasingly creative ways. It's officiating by intuition, which sounds romantic until you realise someone's brain cells might be at stake. You watch Jimmerson bounce on his toes, throwing shadow punches and displaying the kind of boxing footwork that has served him well in squared circles with ropes and rules. Meanwhile, Royce stands perfectly still, his breathing so controlled you wonder if he's forgotten he's about to fight, or if he's accessing some kind of martial arts meditation technique that makes violence feel like a friendly conversation. When the fight begins, Jimmerson does exactly what any reasonable boxer would do. He tries to keep distance and land punches. What happens next redefines your understanding of leverage, timing, and the fundamental mechanics of human combat. Royce moves forward with the patience of someone completely uninterested in dramatic striking exchanges, slips under Jimmerson's punches, and attaches himself to the boxer like a human backpack with aggressive intentions. Within moments, they're on the ground, and suddenly Jimerson's boxing skills become about as relevant as his high school Spanish. The single glove that seemed like such a clever innovation now looks like a costume accessory at a chess match. Royce wraps around Jimerson with movements that appear almost gentle, like he's helping an elderly relative into a comfortable chair, except the chair is a submission hold that makes breathing optional. The crowd doesn't understand what they're watching. There's no dramatic striking, no obvious violence, just two men engaged in what looks like the world's most intense cuddling session. Then Jimerson taps the mat, the universal signal for "I would very much like this experience to end now, please." It's over, and most of the audience isn't entirely sure what just happened. You realise you've just witnessed the moment when traditional American ideas about fighting, bigger, stronger, more aggressive equals better, met a completely different philosophy that treats violence like a problem to be solved rather than a contest to be won. Royce doesn't look like he just survived a fight. He looks like he just demonstrated a particularly interesting yoga position that happened to involve another person. As Royce walks back to his corner, his expression unchanged, you understand that this isn't just about winning a tournament anymore. This is about proving that everything people think they know about fighting might be completely wrong, and that the skinny kid in the white pajamas might possess knowledge that could revolutionize combat sports forever. You're sitting in your living room in 1995, probably eating cereal that costs more than the entire UFC 5 production budget, watching Royce Gracie systematically dismantle the American understanding of martial arts effectiveness. The guy has won 3 of the first 4 UFCs, and at this point watching him fight is like watching a masterclass in applied physics taught by someone who learned geometry from his grandfather's street fighting stories. UFC 5 takes place in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the event feels different now. The audience knows what they're getting into, which is both good and terrifying for the fighters who aren't named Gracie. The amateur hour atmosphere of the early events is being replaced by something that resembles professional organisation, though professional is still a relative term when your sport involves grown men trying to choke each other unconscious for entertainment. The tournament format continues, but now everyone comes in with anti-Gracie strategies that work about as well as bringing an umbrella to a hurricane. Wrestlers try to keep it standing, strikers try to keep it at distance, and everyone tries to avoid ending up in the position where a 175-pound Brazilian treats them like a human puzzle that needs solving. The problem is that Royce treats every position like a human puzzle that needs solving, which makes avoiding him roughly as effective as avoiding gravity. You watch Royce face Dan Severn, a legitimate NCAA wrestling champion and legitimate scary person who looks like he was carved from a tree that specialised in intimidation. Severn weighs about 250 pounds of functional muscle and wrestling technique, the kind of athlete who makes other athletes reconsider their life choices. When he picks up Royce and carries him around the octagon like a briefcase with legs, you think maybe this is where the Gracie magic finally meets its match. But 30 minutes later, 30 actual minutes of fighting with no time limits, because apparently someone thought watching exhausted men grapple indefinitely was peak entertainment, Royce escapes from underneath this mountain of Midwestern wrestling excellence and locks in a triangle choke that puts Severn to sleep like a bedtime story told through applied pressure to the carotid arteries. The commentators are running out of superlatives, which is impressive considering they started with relatively few. Jim Brown, the NFL legend turned colour commentator, sounds like he's watching his understanding of athleticism get slowly dismantled in real time. His insights into football strategy don't particularly translate to explaining why a small Brazilian can make large Americans take involuntary naps. So mostly he just sounds amazed that any of this is happening. What you're witnessing is the transformation of a novelty act into a systematic revolution in thinking about human combat. Royce isn't just winning fights. He's making everyone else's martial arts backgrounds look like expensive hobbies that happen to involve violence. Karate black belts, kickboxing champions, and wrestling All-Americans are all discovering that their specializations might be missing some crucial information about what happens when two people really, truly want to hurt each other. The Gracie family is becoming a brand, though they probably don't think of it in those terms yet. Their challenge matches in Brazil, their teaching methodology, and their complete confidence in their system are all being validated in front of American pay-per-view audiences who are slowly realizing they're watching the birth of something entirely new in sports entertainment. Meanwhile, other fighters are desperately trying to figure out how to beat this system, which leads to some creative interpretations of fighting strategy that work about as well as creative interpretations of mathematics. You're watching UFC 6 through 10, and something fundamental has shifted in the fighting landscape. The other competitors have finally figured out that showing up without any ground fighting knowledge is like entering a cooking competition without understanding that heat makes things hot. Suddenly, everyone is either a wrestler trying to learn submissions or a striker trying to learn wrestling, and the fights are starting to resemble actual mixed martial arts rather than a series of style versus style exhibitions. Tank Abbott emerges as the perfect foil to the Gracie methodology, a street-fighting, beer-drinking, tattoo-covered embodiment of American violence who treats the octagon like his personal bar fight venue. Tank doesn't have a martial arts background so much as a criminal justice background, but his punching power could probably be registered as a municipal weapon. He represents everything the Gracies are proving wrong about fighting, except sometimes wrong punches people so hard that technique becomes temporarily irrelevant. The production values are improving, which means someone finally realised that broadcasting fights through cameras, operated by people with Parkinson's disease, might not be optimal television. The octagon gets better lighting, the commentary becomes more professional, and the whole enterprise starts resembling a legitimate sporting event, rather than an elaborate way to settle disputes that couldn't be resolved through strongly worded letters. You notice that Royce isn't dominating quite as easily now. The other fighters have learned enough defensive grappling to avoid being submitted in the first exchange, which means fights are lasting longer and becoming more complex. Royce still wins, but now he has to work for it, solving increasingly difficult human puzzles as his opponents learn to protect themselves from the basic submission attempts. Frank Shamrock appears like a glimpse into the future of the sport. A fighter who is legitimately trained in multiple disciplines and can transition smoothly between striking and grappling. He's not the biggest or strongest competitor, but he understands that this new sport requires a new kind of athlete. While everyone else is trying to adapt their existing skills to mixed martial arts, Shamrock is building mixed martial arts skills from the ground up. The Gracie family's success has created an unexpected problem. They're victims of their own effectiveness. Every training camp in America now includes some version of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, usually taught by someone who learned it from someone who once rolled with a Gracie student's cousin. The quality varies wildly, like learning surgery from YouTube videos, but the basic concepts are spreading through the fighting community faster than gossip in a small town. Don Frye emerges as another evolution in fighting, a wrestler with legitimate striking skills and the kind of mustache that suggests he might have served in multiple branches of the military simultaneously. He represents the American answer to Brazilian technique, overwhelming conditioning, solid wrestling, and the kind of punching power that makes defensive strategy feel optional. When he fights, it looks less like a chess match and more like a construction project involving controlled demolitions. The tournament format is starting to show its limitations as fighters become more well-rounded and fights last longer. Watching exhausted men grapple for 40 minutes might have novelty value, but it makes for television that occasionally resembles watching paint dry, except the paint is sweaty and occasionally bleeds. You're seeing the birth of weight classes too, as the David versus Goliath appeal of early UFCs gives way to the realization that maybe 400-pound sumo wrestlers shouldn't fight 170-pound Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners for the same reason that motorcycles shouldn't race freight trains. You're watching UFC 11 in September 1996, and something feels different about Royce Gracie's performance against Mark Coleman. Coleman is a different kind of wrestler than Dan Severn, younger, stronger, and more aggressive in ways that make defensive strategy feel like a luxury rather than a choice. When he picks up Royce and slams him to the canvas with the enthusiasm of someone who clearly enjoyed playground bullying, you realise the Gracie invincibility might have an expiration date. The fight goes to a 30-minute draw, which in UFC terms means both men got to experience what it's like to be too tired to continue hurting each other effectively. Royce, for the first time in UFC competition, looks human. He's breathing heavily, his technique is less crisp, and his usual calm demeanour has been replaced by the expression of someone who just realised his math homework was harder than expected. This draw represents more than just one fight's outcome. It's the moment when the sport evolved beyond the Gracie family's ability to control its direction. Other fighters have learned enough about ground fighting to neutralise the Gracie's primary advantages, while developing their own skills that the traditional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu curriculum didn't specifically address. It's like watching your favourite teacher discover that some of their students have become smarter than the curriculum anticipated. Behind the scenes, Roy and Gracie is discovering that creating a successful sport and controlling a successful sport are entirely different challenges. The UFC has grown beyond a vehicle for demonstrating his family's martial art into something that resembles an actual business, with investors, television contracts, and the kind of legal complications that require more than family meetings to resolve. The Semaphore Entertainment Group, which produces the events, is dealing with increasing pressure from athletic commissions, politicians, and various groups who believe that watching people fight for entertainment might not represent humanity's finest impulses. John McCain, the Arizona senator, begins referring to UFC events as human cockfighting, which is both inaccurate and unfortunately catchy as political soundbites go. You notice that the crowds are different now too. The early events attracted martial arts enthusiasts curious about style effectiveness and combat sports fans looking for something more authentic than professional wrestling. Now, the audiences include people who seem primarily interested in watching other people get hurt, which changes the atmosphere from educational to predatory in ways that make everyone involved slightly uncomfortable. The rules are evolving too, mostly in response to incidents that nobody anticipated when they first decided to see what happens when you let people fight with minimal restrictions. Weight classes are being discussed seriously, time limits are being implemented, and certain techniques are being evaluated for their entertainment value versus their potential for creating emergency room visits. Royce Gracie announces his temporary retirement from UFC competition, officially to focus on teaching, but unofficially, because the family secret is no longer secret, and maintaining dominance requires evolving faster than their opponents learn. It's a strategic withdrawal disguised as a personal choice, the kind of decision that looks wise in retrospect but feels like abandonment in the moment. What you're witnessing is the end of the Gracie era of UFC dominance and the beginning of the actual mixed martial arts era, where no single style or family can control the sport's development, and success requires constantly adapting to what other people have learned from your previous victories. You're living through the late 1990s and early 2000s, watching the UFC slowly suffocate under political pressure that makes McCarthyism look subtle. Senator John McCain has appointed himself the moral guardian of America, combat sports, apparently deciding that professional boxing's brain damage and wrestling's theatrical violence are perfectly acceptable. But watching skilled athletes compete in mixed martial arts represents a clear threat to civilization as we know it. McCain's human cockfighting campaign catches fire with the kind of politicians who need simple issues to demonstrate their commitment to family values. The fact that UFC events have fewer serious injuries than most mainstream sports doesn't matter when you're trying to score points with voters who think violence should be limited to action movies and football. The senator from Arizona launches a crusade that will nearly kill the sport before it fully develops, proving that sometimes the biggest threats to innovation come from people who understand it least. State athletic commissions, nervous about political backlash and uncertain about how to regulate something they've never seen before, begin banning UFC events faster than you can say unregulated violence. New York bans it, California bans it, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and a growing list of states decide that whatever the UFC represents, they want no part of it within their borders. The sport that was supposed to determine the ultimate fighting style is suddenly banned from most of the ultimate fighting markets. Pay-per-view carriers start dropping UFC events like they're contaminated with something contagious and legally actionable. Cable companies, already nervous about violent content and facing pressure from advocacy groups, decide that broadcasting cage fighting might not align with their corporate values. The irony that these same companies happily broadcast boxing matches where the explicit goal is brain trauma through repeated head strikes is apparently lost on their risk management departments. You watch Semaphore Entertainment Group scramble to find venues in states that haven't banned the events yet, leading to UFCs held in places like Birmingham, Alabama and Dothan, Alabama, locations chosen not for their fight sport traditions, but for their willingness to allow something that most of America has decided is too dangerous for public consumption. The production budgets shrink, the venues get smaller, and the whole enterprise starts looking less like the future of sports and more like a travelling circus that overstayed its welcome. The financial reality becomes brutal quickly. Pay-per-view buys drop from hundreds of thousands to tens of thousands. Sponsorship money disappears as companies decide that associating their brands with banned cage fighting might not optimize their marketing strategies. Fighter purses shrink to amounts that make working at McDonald's look like executive compensation, and the talent pool begins migrating to other combat sports that can actually pay their bills. Bob Meyerowitz, who acquired the UFC from the original creators, finds himself owning a property that generates more legal fees than revenue. Every event requires navigating complex regulatory environments, dealing with political pressure, and convincing venues that hosting UFC events won't result in congressional investigations or community boycotts. It's like trying to run a business while most of your potential customers are being told that your product represents everything wrong with modern society. The media coverage becomes uniformly negative, with journalists who clearly haven't watched events describing UFC competition as barely regulated violence designed to satisfy bloodthirsty audiences. The nuanced skill development, the chess-like strategic elements, and the obvious athleticism of the competitors get lost in descriptions that make it sound like gladiatorial combat with better lighting and contemporary haircuts. You're witnessing one of the most improbable business acquisitions in sports history when Lorenzo Fertitta and Dana White decide to purchase the UFC for $2 million in January 2001. Most people would consider this roughly equivalent to buying the Titanic after it hit the iceberg, technically a famous ship, but with significant structural problems and a concerning trajectory toward the bottom of the ocean. Lorenzo Fertitta brings casino money and business experience to an enterprise that desperately needs both. His family's Station Casinos empire has taught him that sometimes you have to take calculated risks on entertainment properties that other people consider too dangerous or controversial. The difference is that when people lose money at casinos, politicians generally consider that a personal responsibility issue. When people get hurt in cage fighting, politicians tend to treat it as a public safety crisis, requiring immediate legislative intervention. Dana White becomes the public face and president of the new ownership, bringing energy, promotional instincts, and the kind of confrontational personality that either revolutionizes industries or destroys everything it touches. His background includes managing fighters and understanding the promotional side of combat sports. Though managing a sport that's banned in most major markets presents unique challenges that don't appear in traditional business school curricula. The first order of business is making UFC events legal again, which requires convincing athletic commissions that mixed martial arts can be regulated safely and professionally. This means implementing comprehensive rules, medical protocols, and the kind of bureaucratic oversight that transforms spontaneous violence into sanctioned sport. It's like getting permission to run a business that most people have already decided shouldn't exist. The new rules fundamentally change what UFC competition looks like. Weight classes eliminate the David versus Goliath spectacle that characterized early events, but create more competitive fights, where skill differences matter more than size advantages. Time limits prevent fights from lasting indefinitely, which improves television pacing but sometimes cuts short technical battles that were just getting interesting. Forbidden techniques like eye gouging, biting, and groin strikes make the competition safer but arguably less representative of actual no-holds-barred fighting. You watch the sport slowly crawl back into mainstream venues as athletic commissions grudgingly acknowledge that properly regulated mixed martial arts might be less dangerous than boxing, where the explicit goal involves inflicting neurological damage through repetitive head trauma. Nevada leads the way, partly because Las Vegas casinos understand that combat sports attract tourists who enjoy wagering on competitive violence, and partly because Nevada has experience regulating activities that other states consider morally questionable. The production values improved dramatically under Zuffa ownership, transforming UFC broadcasts from events that looked like they were produced by enthusiastic amateurs into television that resembles actual professional sports coverage. Better cameras, professional lighting, improved commentary, and the kind of production polish that makes the difference between something people watch and something people actively seek out to watch. Fighter pay increases, though increases is relative when you're starting from purses that barely covered travel expenses to events held in states that most people couldn't locate on maps. The new ownership understands that attracting legitimate athletes requires compensation that acknowledges their skills represent valuable entertainment properties, not just people willing to fight for whatever money happens to be available. The talent pool begins improving as word spreads, that UFC competition might actually offer career opportunities, rather than just occasional paydays for people willing to get hurt in public. Legitimate wrestlers, boxers, and martial artists start considering mixed martial arts as a potential profession rather than a curiosity they might try once for the experience. You're watching Zuffa slowly rebuild the UFC from the ground up, treating it less like a martial arts demonstration and more like a legitimate professional sport that happens to involve people trying to hurt each other in controlled circumstances. This transformation requires changing everything from how fights are promoted, to how fighters are trained, to how audiences understand what they're watching. The marketing strategy shifts from emphasizing the extreme, unregulated nature of early UFC events to highlighting the skill, athleticism, and strategic complexity of modern mixed martial arts competition. Instead of promoting no-holds-barred violence, UFC events are now marketed as showcasing the world's most complete fighters, competing under unified rules that ensure both safety and fairness. It's like rebranding a demolition derby as a precision driving exhibition, technically accurate, but requiring audiences to appreciate entirely different aspects of the same basic activity. Chuck Liddell emerges as the perfect ambassador for this new approach, a former college wrestler turned striker whose knockout power and laid-back California personality make him simultaneously dangerous and likable. He represents mixed martial arts as a legitimate sport practiced by legitimate athletes, rather than street fighting with better production values. When Chuck knocks someone unconscious, it looks like athletic excellence rather than random violence, which makes all the difference in how audiences and regulators perceive UFC competition. Tito Ortiz provides the perfect heel character that every successful combat sport needs. Someone skilled enough to deserve respect, but abrasive enough to make audiences actively hope someone knocks him unconscious. His trash-talking, showboating, and general commitment to being the person everyone loves to hate creates the kind of personal drama that transforms athletic competition into entertainment spectacle. The fact that he can back up his mouth with legitimate fighting skills makes the drama feel authentic rather than manufactured. The Ultimate Fighter reality show concept begins development as a way to create new stars, while educating audiences about what mixed martial arts training actually involves. The idea is brilliant in its simplicity. Take promising fighters, house them together, film their training and personal interactions, then have them compete in a tournament that creates both entertainment and legitimate prospects for UFC events. It's like the real world, except the roommates are professional athletes preparing to fight each other, which eliminates most of the artificial drama because the real drama is built into the format. You notice that the fights themselves are evolving rapidly as athletes begin training specifically for mixed martial arts competition rather than adapting skills from other combat sports. The grappling becomes more sophisticated, the striking more diverse, and the transitions between different fighting ranges more seamless. What emerges is a new kind of athlete. Not a boxer who learned some wrestling, or a wrestler who learned some submissions, but someone who developed all their skills specifically for mixed martial arts competition. The judging system develops to handle fights that don't end in knockouts or submissions, creating a framework for determining winners in contests that involve striking, grappling, and positional control. It's not perfect. No judging system for combat sports is, but it provides the structure necessary for mixed martial arts to function as a professional sport with consistent standards and predictable outcomes. International expansion begins as UFC events start happening outside the United States, testing whether American mixed martial arts can translate to international markets with different cultural attitudes toward combat sports and violence as entertainment. The early international events suggest that watching skilled athletes compete transcends cultural boundaries, though the specific ways different audiences react to mixed martial arts competition vary considerably. You're sitting in front of your television in 2005, flipping through channels and accidentally discovering something that will change sports entertainment forever. A reality show about fighters living together, training together, and eventually trying to knock each other unconscious on live television. The Ultimate Fighter doesn't look like much in those first few episodes. A house full of athletes with questionable decision-making skills, cameras everywhere, and the kind of interpersonal drama that emerges when competitive people are confined together with nothing to do except train and think about fighting each other. The concept seems almost too simple to work. Take 16 mixed martial arts prospects, divide them into two teams coached by established UFC stars, house them together without access to phones, internet, or any of the normal distractions that prevent people from focusing entirely on their anxieties about upcoming combat, then film everything that happens, is like Big Brother. Except the house guests are professional athletes preparing for actual physical confrontation, which eliminates the need to manufacture drama through artificial challenges. Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar emerge from the show as unlikely protagonists, neither the most skilled nor the most charismatic competitors, but both possessed of the kind of authentic, relatable personalities that make audiences genuinely care about their success. Griffin looks like someone's older brother who got really good at fighting, while Bonnar resembles a college student who discovered that mixed martial arts training was more interesting than his business courses. They're everyman athletes in a sport that's still trying to convince mainstream audiences that it's populated by people, rather than just violent sociopaths. The training footage reveals something that promotional materials had never successfully communicated. Mixed martial arts requires the kind of comprehensive athletic preparation that would challenge Olympic athletes. You watch fighters drilling techniques, studying video, working on conditioning, and engaging in the kind of detailed technical preparation that makes it clear this is legitimate sport, practiced by legitimate athletes. The cameras capture the chess-like complexity of ground fighting, the scientific approach to striking combinations, and the mental preparation required to voluntarily engage in sanctioned violence. The house dynamics create natural storytelling opportunities that professional wrestling scripts could never match. Real personality conflicts between people who know they might have to fight each other produce tension that feels authentic because it is authentic. When someone acts like an asshole during training, there's a genuine possibility that their behaviour will be addressed through physical confrontation in front of thousands of people, which tends to make interpersonal drama feel more meaningful than typical reality television conflicts. You notice that the show is educating audiences about mixed martial arts technique in ways that traditional fight broadcasts never could. Seeing fighters learn new skills, work on specific problems, and develop strategies for particular opponents makes the actual fights more comprehensible to viewers who might not understand the technical aspects of ground fighting or the strategic implications of different fighting styles. It's like getting a masterclass in mixed martial arts appreciation disguised as reality television entertainment. The production values balance professional television standards with authentic behind-the-scenes access, creating something that feels both polished and real. The cameras capture genuine moments, fighters dealing with homesickness, struggling with training injuries, supporting each other through difficulties, that humanize competitors in ways that traditional sports coverage rarely achieves. Dana White's role as the show's authority figure establishes him as the face of the UFC in ways that traditional sports commissioners never achieve. His direct, sometimes confrontational communication style with the fighters creates dramatic tension, while demonstrating that the UFC takes its athletes seriously as both competitors and people. When he cuts someone from the show for unprofessional behaviour, it carries weight because the consequences are real career implications, not just temporary television embarrassment. You're watching the finale of The Ultimate Fighter's first season, April 9th, 2005, and you have no idea you're about to witness the most important 15 minutes in mixed martial arts history. Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonnar for the UFC contract should be a relatively minor fight between two athletes who didn't win their brackets in the tournament. But sometimes sporting history gets made by people who weren't supposed to be making history. The atmosphere in the Cox Pavilion feels different from previous UFC events. The audience includes people who have been following these fighters' personalities and personal stories for weeks through the television show, creating an emotional investment that goes beyond appreciating athletic skill. You can feel that the crowd wants both men to succeed, which creates a unique energy for a combat sport where audiences typically choose sides and hope for definitive victories. From the opening bell, both fighters abandon any pretense of careful strategy and engage in the kind of sustained back-and-forth battle that makes tactical analysis irrelevant and emotional investment inevitable. Griffin's boxing background meets Bonnar's wrestling base in combinations that flow seamlessly between striking exchanges and grappling sequences. Neither man seems particularly interested in protecting himself from damage, which creates the kind of authentic drama that choreographed violence can never replicate. You watch 15 minutes of fighting that demonstrates everything mixed martial arts can be at its best. technical skill applied with emotional intensity, strategic thinking under physical duress, and the kind of mutual respect between competitors that transforms violence into art. Both men hurt each other, both recover, both continue engaging with the kind of heart that makes audiences forget they're watching a sport and start feeling like they're witnessing something approaching heroic. The crowd reaction becomes part of the fight itself, with audience energy feeding fighter performance in ways that create upward spirals of excitement and effort. Every significant strike, every successful takedown, every near submission gets the kind of response typically reserved for championship contests, making it clear that this fight has transcended its original context and become something much more significant. When Griffin wins by unanimous decision, both fighters receive UFC contracts because Dana White understands that he's just watched something that can't be quantified through traditional winner-loser frameworks. The fight quality, the entertainment value, and the audience response combine to create a moment where business considerations align perfectly with sporting justice and promotional wisdom. The media coverage of Griffin Bonner transforms overnight, with mainstream sports outlets suddenly paying attention to mixed martial arts in ways they had previously reserved for established major sports. The fight gets replayed on ESPN, discussed on sports talk radio, and written about in newspapers that had previously ignored UFC events entirely. You're watching the moment when mixed martial arts moves from niche interest to legitimate mainstream entertainment. The pay-per-view numbers tell the story in concrete terms. UFC 53, headlined by Griffin Bonner, does significantly better business than previous events, demonstrating that reality television can successfully create audiences for live combat sports. The Ultimate Fighter format proves that giving audiences personal investment in fighters' success makes them more likely to pay to watch those fighters compete, which seems obvious in retrospect but represented revolutionary thinking in combat sports marketing. More importantly, the fight proves that mixed martial arts can produce the kind of sustained excitement and emotional drama that defines great sporting events. This isn't just about watching skilled athletes compete, it's about witnessing human beings push themselves to their limits in ways that create genuine inspiration and authentic entertainment. You're watching the UFC systematically create the kind of star power that transforms niche sports into mainstream entertainment, and the process is equal. Parts calculated marketing genius and happy accident. The Ultimate Fighter's success proves that audiences will invest emotionally in fighters whose personalities they understand, which creates opportunities to build genuine celebrities from athletes who might otherwise remain unknown outside hardcore fighting communities. Chuck Liddell becomes the first UFC fighter to achieve legitimate mainstream name recognition, appearing on talk shows, magazine covers, and in contexts that have nothing to do with actually fighting. His mohawk haircut, knockout power, and surprisingly articulate interviews create a perfect storm of marketability, dangerous enough to maintain fighting credibility, but approachable enough to represent the sport to audiences who might be intimidated by the idea of cage fighting. When Chuck knocks someone unconscious, it looks like athletic excellence rather than senseless violence. Tito Ortiz provides the perfect heel character, generating the kind of audience hatred that transforms athletic competition into personal drama. His trash-talking, self-promotion, and general commitment to being antagonistic create storylines that make individual fights feel like chapters in ongoing narratives. The fact that he possesses legitimate fighting skills prevents his personality from overshadowing his athletic abilities, creating authentic rather than manufactured drama. The pay-per-view model begins generating serious revenue as audiences demonstrate willingness to pay for fights featuring fighters whose personalities they've come to know through reality television, promotional appearances, and the kind of media coverage that treats mixed martial arts as legitimate sports entertainment. Events that might have struggled to sell 100,000 pay-per-views now regularly exceed 300,000 buys, with major fights approaching the kind of numbers that boxing champions generate for significant contests. International expansion accelerates as UFC events begin regularly taking place outside the United States, testing whether American mixed martial arts can translate to markets with different cultural attitudes toward combat sports. The early international events suggest that watching skilled athletes compete transcends cultural boundaries, though the specific ways different audiences react to mixed martial arts vary considerably, based on their existing relationships with combat sports and violence as entertainment. The athlete pool continues evolving as legitimate prospects from other combat sports begin viewing mixed martial arts as a potential career path, rather than just a curiosity they might try occasionally. College wrestlers, amateur boxers, and martial artists from various backgrounds start training specifically for mixed martial arts competition, creating a deeper talent pool that drives up the overall skill level and entertainment value of UFC events. Fighter development programs begin emerging as the UFC recognizes that creating stars requires more than just finding athletes who can fight effectively. Media training, personality development, and the kind of promotional support that helps fighters build personal brands become part of the organization's approach to talent management. The most successful UFC fighters are those who can both compete at elite levels and communicate their personalities to audiences in ways that create emotional investment. The judging and officiating continue improving as athletic commissions develop more sophisticated understanding of how to evaluate mixed martial arts competition. Referees become better at recognizing when fights should be stopped. Judges develop more consistent criteria for scoring rounds that don't end in knockouts or submissions, and the overall regulatory framework begins approaching the kind of professionalism that characterizes other major sports. Television coverage expands beyond pay-per-view as UFC events begin appearing on cable networks, exposing mixed martial arts to audiences who might not be willing to pay specifically to watch fights, but are curious enough to sample the programming if it's included in their existing entertainment options. These television events serve as both promotional tools for pay-per-view cards and legitimate entertainment properties in their own right. You're living through 2010 to 2012, watching the UFC transform from a niche combat sport into a legitimate entertainment juggernaut that's reshaping how America thinks about professional athletics. The pay-per-view numbers are reaching boxing championship levels. Mainstream media coverage has shifted from skeptical to genuinely interested, and suddenly everyone from your accountant to your grandmother has opinions about mixed martial arts strategy and fighter personalities. The roster expansion is happening at breakneck speed as the UFC signs fighters from around the world, creating a truly international talent pool that makes every weight division feel like a united nations of violence. Brazilian jiu-jitsu specialists, Russian wrestlers, Dutch kickboxers, American college athletes and martial artists from disciplines most people have never heard of are all finding their way into the octagon. The result is a level of competition depth that makes every fight potentially significant and every fighter potentially dangerous. Brock Lesnar's arrival from professional wrestling represents a seismic shift in how mainstream audiences perceive UFC competition. Here's a legitimate NCAA wrestling champion and WWE superstar bringing name recognition, promotional skills, and genuine athletic credentials to mixed martial arts competition. When Lesnar fights, he draws audiences who have never watched UFC events before, proving that star power can transcend sport boundaries if the underlying athletic competition is legitimate. The Fox television deal in 2011 puts UFC programming on broadcast television for the first time, exposing mixed martial arts to audiences who would never seek it out on pay-per-view or cable. Suddenly, people flipping through channels encounter professional mixed martial arts competition alongside football, baseball, and basketball. The production values, athlete quality, and entertainment value prove that mixed martial arts can compete with any major sport for audience attention and appreciation. You notice that the fighters themselves are evolving rapidly, becoming more complete athletes and more sophisticated entertainers. The one-dimensional specialists who characterized early UFC competition have been replaced by athletes who trained specifically for mixed martial arts from the beginning of their careers. These fighters understand that success requires not just fighting skills, but also the ability to promote themselves, engage with media, and build personal brands that extend beyond their athletic achievements. The women's divisions begin developing as female fighters prove that mixed martial arts skill and entertainment value aren't limited to male athletes. Fighters like Gina Carano and later Ronda Rousey demonstrate that women's mixed martial arts can generate the same kind of audience interest and athletic excitement that characterizes men's competition. The addition of women's divisions doubles the UFC's potential star power, while proving that mixed martial arts appeal transcends gender boundaries. International events become regular occurrences as UFC cards take place in Canada, the United Kingdom, Brazil, and other markets where mixed martial arts enjoys legal status and cultural acceptance. These events often feature local fighters in prominent positions, creating regional stars and proving that mixed martial arts can function as both global entertainment and local cultural expression. The sponsorship revenue increases dramatically as major corporations recognize that UFC audiences represent valuable demographic targets. Companies that might never associate their brands with boxing or other combat sports begin sponsoring UFC events and individual fighters, suggesting that mixed martial arts has achieved the kind of mainstream acceptance that attracts serious marketing investment. Social media transforms how fighters build their personal brands and interact with fans, creating direct communication channels that bypass traditional media gatekeepers. Fighters with strong social media presences can develop loyal followings that translate into pay-per-view buys and attendance at live events, making personality and communication skills increasingly important for career success. You're witnessing something unprecedented in combat sports history, as Ronda Rousey transforms from Olympic judoka to mainstream celebrity through a combination of athletic dominance and media savvy that redefines what mixed martial arts stardom can look like. Her arrival in the UFC coincides perfectly with the organization's decision to add women's divisions, creating a moment when athletic opportunity meets promotional genius and cultural readiness for female combat sports heroes. Rousey's early UFC fights don't just demonstrate athletic superiority, they represent systematic destruction of opponents through techniques that most casual fans have never seen applied at elite levels. Her judo background allows her to throw women who outweigh her, and her armbar submissions end fights so quickly that audiences barely have time to understand what happened before the referee is stopping the contest. Watching Rousey fight becomes less about appreciating competitive balance and more about witnessing athletic artistry applied with devastating efficiency. The media coverage of Rousey transcends traditional sports journalism and enters celebrity territory typically reserved for actors and musicians. She appears on magazine covers, late-night talk shows, and in contexts that have nothing to do with fighting, proving that the right mixed martial arts athlete can achieve genuine mainstream fame. Her willingness to discuss her personal life, training philosophy, and career ambitions creates the kind of authentic personality that transforms athletes into cultural figures. The do-nothing bitch speech becomes a cultural moment that extends far beyond mixed martial arts audiences, resonating with women who have never watched UFC events, but connect with Rousey's message about self-reliance and personal empowerment. Suddenly, feminists who might theoretically oppose violence as entertainment are embracing a fighter who represents strength, independence, and the rejection of traditional gender limitations. Her crossover appeal brings new demographic groups to UFC events, particularly women who previously had no interest in combat sports, but are curious about watching a female athlete dominate in ways that challenge conventional ideas about physical capability and competitive achievement. Pay-per-view events headlined by Rousey consistently outperform projections, proving that star power can create audiences rather than just appealing to existing fan bases. The Hollywood connections develop naturally as Rousey's fame transcends sports, leading to movie roles that capitalize on her fighting skills and mainstream name recognition. Her transition between athletic competition and entertainment acting demonstrates that modern mixed martial arts athletes can build careers that extend well beyond their fighting primes, creating new models for athlete celebrity development. Training footage and behind-the-scenes content reveal the scientific approach to Rousey's preparation, showcasing training methods and technical development that educate audiences about what elite mixed martial arts preparation actually involves. Her camp footage makes it clear that success at the highest levels requires the kind of comprehensive athletic and mental preparation that rivals any professional sport. The psychological warfare aspect of Rousey's pre-fight promotion creates additional entertainment value as she combines legitimate intimidation with media manipulation techniques that build audience anticipation for her fights. Her ability to get inside opponents' heads while simultaneously promoting fights to mainstream audiences demonstrates sophisticated understanding of both competitive psychology and entertainment marketing. International recognition follows domestic success as Rousey becomes a global ambassador for both women's mixed martial arts and American athletic achievement. Her success opens opportunities for female fighters around the world, while proving that mixed martial arts can produce the kind of internationally recognized stars that represent American sports culture on the world stage. You're watching the emergence of Conor McGregor from obscure Irish featherweight to global entertainment phenomenon, and the transformation happens with the kind of speed and intensity that makes other athletes' career trajectories look like they're happening in slow motion. McGregor's combination of legitimate fighting skill, supernatural self-promotion ability, and perfect timing creates a perfect storm that will redefine what mixed martial arts stardom can achieve in terms of both athletic success and mainstream cultural impact. His early UFC appearances immediately established McGregor as something different from typical mixed martial arts athletes. Someone who understands that professional fighting is ultimately entertainment, and that audiences connect with personalities as much as they appreciate athletic skill. His trash-talking isn't just pre-fight promotion, it's performance art that happens to involve predicting how he'll hurt other people for money. The Irish accent, the precise verbal delivery, and the absolute confidence in his own abilities create a character that seems designed for maximum entertainment value. The technical aspects of McGregor's fighting demonstrate that his promotional skills aren't compensating for athletic limitations. His striking accuracy, timing and power represent elite-level mixed martial arts capability. His left hand becomes genuinely famous, generating the kind of specific technical recognition usually reserved for signature moves in individual sports like tennis or golf. When McGregor predicts knockout victories, audiences believe him because his previous predictions have proven accurate with uncomfortable regularity. The fashion sense and lifestyle choices create additional entertainment value beyond his actual fighting. As McGregor's social media presence offers glimpses into a life of luxury and excess that most professional athletes can't afford or wouldn't choose to display so publicly. His custom suits, expensive cars and lavish spending become part of his appeal, proving that mixed martial arts success can generate the kind of wealth traditionally associated with boxing champions or mainstream sports superstars. The Dublin events transform UFC international expansion from business strategy into cultural celebration, as McGregor's hometown support creates atmosphere that rivals major sporting events in any discipline. Irish fans don't just attend his fights, they create experiences that make other sporting events feel subdued by comparison. The singing, chanting, and general enthusiasm demonstrate that mixed martial arts can generate the kind of passionate regional support that characterizes soccer or rugby in international competitions. Media training becomes unnecessary for McGregor because his natural communication skills exceed what most professional athletes achieve, even with extensive preparation and coaching. His interviews are simultaneously entertaining, informative, and promotional without feeling scripted or artificial. He understands intuitively how to build anticipation for fights while providing content that works across different media platforms and audience segments. The crossover potential becomes evident as McGregor's fame transcends mixed martial arts and begins approaching the kind of mainstream recognition that allows athletes to become cultural figures independent of their sporting achievements. His appearance on talk shows, magazine covers, and in non-sports contexts suggests that he's building the kind of personal brand that can survive and thrive beyond his competitive fighting career. Financial success reaches unprecedented levels for mixed martial arts athletes, as McGregor's pay-per-view drawing power generates the kind of revenue that puts him in conversation with boxing's biggest stars. His disclosed purses represent just the beginning of his actual earnings, as sponsorship deals, appearance fees, and merchandise sales create income streams that approach what major sports superstars earn in more established leagues and competitions. The psychological impact on other UFC fighters becomes apparent as McGregor's success demonstrates new possibilities for mixed martial arts athlete achievement, while simultaneously making everyone else's accomplishments look modest by comparison. You're witnessing the most significant transformation in UFC history, as ESPN and Disney money fundamentally reshapes what mixed martial arts can become as both sport and entertainment property. The $1.5 billion deal doesn't just represent a television contract. It's recognition that mixed martial arts has achieved the kind of mainstream acceptance that puts it in the same category as NFL football, NBA basketball, and other properties that define American sports entertainment. The production values immediately jump to levels that make previous UFC broadcasts look amateurish by comparison, as ESPN's technical capabilities and experienced production teams transform how mixed martial arts competition appears on television. The camera work becomes more sophisticated, the graphics more informative, and the overall presentation more polished without losing the authentic. energy that distinguishes UFC events from other sports programming. It's like watching your favourite local band suddenly get a major record deal and professional studio time. The commentary teams evolved to include mainstream sports broadcasters alongside traditional mixed martial arts analysts, creating a blend of insider knowledge and accessible explanation that serves both hardcore fans and casual viewers discovering the sport through ESPN programming. The addition of established sports personalities lends credibility, while the retention of mixed martial arts specialists maintains authenticity, striking a balance that's difficult to achieve but crucial for expanding audience appeal. The scheduling integration with ESPN's broader programming strategy puts UFC content alongside SportsCenter, NFL coverage, and other flagship properties, normalizing mixed martial arts as just another sport that serious sports fans should understand and appreciate. When UFC highlights appear on SportsCenter next to baseball home runs and football touchdowns, it signals cultural acceptance that no amount of pay-per-view success could achieve independently. International expansion accelerates as Disney's global reach provides distribution platforms and marketing capabilities that allow UFC events to reach audiences worldwide with production values and promotional support that rival major American sports leagues. Events in London, Paris, and other international markets now receive the kind of promotional build-up and media attention typically reserved for championship boxing or major tennis tournaments. The athlete development programs expand significantly as increased revenue allows for more comprehensive support systems for UFC fighters, including enhanced medical care, performance training resources, and career development opportunities that extend beyond active competition. The UFC Performance Institute becomes a legitimate sports science facility that rivals training centers used by Olympic athletes and major league sports teams. Data analytics and performance measurement become integral parts of both fighter development and audience engagement, as ESPN's experience with sports statistics and advanced metrics brings new depth to how mixed martial arts competition is analyzed and presented to audiences. Fight statistics, performance trends, and predictive modeling transform from curiosities into essential components of broadcast coverage and fan engagement. The social media integration leverages Disney's experience with content distribution across multiple platforms, creating comprehensive digital strategies that turn UFC events into ongoing entertainment experiences rather than isolated pay-per-view broadcasts. Behind-the-scenes content, fighter profiles, and training footage become regular programming that maintains audience engagement between major events. Sponsorship opportunities multiply as ESPN's advertising relationships provide UFC events with access to major corporate sponsors who might not have considered mixed martial arts partnerships previously. The association with Disney's family-friendly brand image helps normalize mixed martial arts as mainstream entertainment rather than niche violent spectacle, opening doors to sponsors who serve broad demographic segments. You're watching the UFC navigate the COVID-19 pandemic with the kind of adaptability and creative problem-solving that transforms potential disasters into competitive advantages, proving that mixed martial arts' relative simplicity makes it more resilient than sports that require large teams and complex logistics. While major leagues shut down completely or struggle with complicated restart protocols, the UFC finds ways to continue producing content when audiences need entertainment most desperately. Fight Island emerges as both practical solution and marketing masterstroke, as the UAE provides a controlled environment where international fighters can compete without the travel restrictions that complicate tournaments involving multiple countries. The concept sounds like something from an action movie, professional fighters competing on a private island while the world deals with a global pandemic, but the execution demonstrates sophisticated understanding of both medical protocols and entertainment production. The empty arena fights create an entirely different viewing experience that some audiences prefer to traditional crowded events, as the absence of crowd noise allows viewers to hear fighter communication, corner advice, and the actual sounds of combat that are typically masked by audience reactions. These intimate broadcasts reveal aspects of mixed martial arts competition that most fans have never experienced, creating educational opportunities disguised as entertainment programming. Testing protocols and medical supervision reach levels that exceed most professional sports, as the UFC's commitment to continuing operations requires comprehensive health monitoring that becomes a model for other entertainment industries trying to resume production during pandemic conditions. The investment in medical infrastructure demonstrates both corporate responsibility and business necessity, as any outbreak could destroy the entire restart effort. The broadcast schedule intensifies as ESPN programming needs increase, while other sports remain shut down, positioning UFC content as reliable entertainment when audiences are largely confined to their homes and desperately seeking distraction from pandemic-related stress and uncertainty. Events that might normally compete for audience attention with baseball games and basketball playoffs suddenly become appointment television for sports-starved viewers. International talent acquisition accelerates as the UFC uses its operational capabilities to provide opportunities for fighters whose regional promotions have been shut down by pandemic restrictions, creating a deeper talent pool while serving as a lifeline for athletes whose careers might otherwise be derailed by circumstances beyond their control. The global reach becomes both competitive advantage and humanitarian service. Production innovations developed for pandemic conditions improve the overall viewing experience in ways that persist beyond COVID-19 restrictions, as enhanced audio capture, improved camera angles, and more comprehensive fighter monitoring create broadcast improvements that enhance audience engagement regardless of venue capacity or crowd presence. The digital content strategy expands significantly as social media consumption increases during lockdown periods, creating opportunities for more comprehensive fighter promotion, behind-the-scenes content and audience engagement that builds personal connections between fighters and fans, even when live attendance is impossible. Economic impact becomes more significant as the UFC provides entertainment industry employment when most production has ceased, supporting not just fighters and directly employed staff, but also the broader ecosystem of vendors, contractors, and service providers who depend on live entertainment events for their livelihoods. You're watching a new generation of UFC stars emerge, who understand intuitively that modern mixed martial arts success requires mastery of both athletic competition and digital media engagement, creating personalities that transcend traditional sports celebrity models. These fighters have grown up with social media, understand audience engagement instinctively, and approach self-promotion with sophistication that makes previous generations of fighters look like amateurs at the business side of professional athletics. Israel Adesanya represents this evolution perfectly, a striker whose technical brilliance is matched by his understanding of narrative construction, personal branding, and cross-cultural appeal. His fighting style is simultaneously artistic and effective. His personality is genuinely charismatic rather than manufactured for promotional purposes, and his ability to connect with audiences across different demographic segments demonstrates how modern UFC stars can build global followings that extend far beyond traditional combat sports audiences. The women's divisions continue evolving as athletes like Amanda Nunes prove that female mixed martial arts can generate the same kind of technical excellence and entertainment value that characterizes men's competition, while fighters like Valentina Shevchenko demonstrate that international appeal isn't limited to English-speaking athletes who fit traditional American entertainment models. The depth of talent in women's divisions has reached levels where championship fights consistently deliver high-quality competition, rather than relying primarily on novelty value. However, the increased mainstream attention also creates new pressures and problems that earlier UFC eras didn't face, as fighters must now manage the kind of public scrutiny and media attention that comes with genuine celebrity status. Social media mistakes, personal controversies, and private life issues become public relations problems that can damage careers and create promotional challenges for events. The price of mainstream success includes losing the privacy that niche sports athletes traditionally enjoyed. Performance-enhancing drug issues become more complex as testing protocols become more sophisticated, and the financial incentives for competitive advantages increase proportionally with the growing prize money and sponsorship opportunities. The USADA partnership creates comprehensive testing programs that catch violations but also generate controversies when popular fighters face suspensions or stripped titles due to positive tests for substances that might not obviously enhance performance. Contract disputes and fighter pay issues become more prominent as athletes recognize that their increased value as entertainment properties should translate into improved compensation, creating tensions between individual fighter interests and UFC business model requirements. High-profile fighters demanding equity stakes, guaranteed minimum payments, and other benefits that reflect their contributions to the organization's success challenge traditional promotion-athlete relationships. The referee and judging quality becomes more crucial as the sport's mainstream profile means that controversial decisions receive extensive media coverage and can damage the organization's credibility in ways that were less significant when mixed martial arts had smaller audiences and lower cultural stakes. Bad stoppages, questionable scorecards, and officiating inconsistencies that might have been overlooked in earlier eras now become major controversies that require public explanation and corrective action. Legal issues multiply as the sport's growth creates more opportunities for regulatory conflicts, jurisdiction problems, and the kind of complex business disputes that characterize major entertainment industries. Antitrust concerns, international regulatory differences, and athlete rights questions become regular considerations rather than occasional problems. You're living through the most complex media landscape in UFC history as streaming platforms, traditional broadcasters, and international markets all compete for mixed martial arts content that has become valuable enough to drive platform subscription strategies. The ESPN Plus integration transforms how audiences consume UFC programming, creating a direct-to-consumer relationship that bypasses traditional cable television while generating data about viewer preferences that enables more targeted content creation and marketing strategies. The international expansion reaches unprecedented levels as UFC events regularly take place in markets that were completely inaccessible to American mixed martial arts just a decade ago, with cards in Paris, London, Abu Dhabi, and other locations drawing local audiences while serving global streaming audiences simultaneously. These international events aren't just business expansion, they're cultural exchange programs that introduce American mixed martial arts to new audiences, while incorporating local fighters and cultural elements that create unique entertainment experiences. The production technology advances to levels that would have been impossible to imagine during early UFC events, with multiple camera angles, real-time biometric monitoring, advanced statistical analysis, and broadcast quality that rivals major network sports programming. The technical capabilities allow for innovative content like embedded documentaries, virtual reality experiences, and interactive viewing options that create more comprehensive entertainment packages around individual fights. The talent pipeline becomes truly global as the UFC develops relationships with regional promotions, amateur competitions, and training facilities worldwide, creating a systematic approach to talent identification and development that ensures consistent influx of skilled athletes from diverse backgrounds and fighting traditions. The international scouting network rivals what major American sports leagues maintain for player development and acquisition. Revenue diversification extends beyond traditional pay-per-view and broadcast rights to include merchandise, video games, fantasy sports integration, cryptocurrency partnerships, and other digital products that turn UFC events into launching points for broader entertainment ecosystems. The organization begins resembling an entertainment conglomerate that uses fighting as its core content, but generates revenue through multiple related streams. The athlete support systems evolve to include comprehensive career development, financial planning, media training, and post-competition transition programs that address the reality that most fighters' active careers last less than a decade, but their need for income and purpose extends far beyond their athletic primes. The UFC Performance Institute becomes a model for athlete development that other sports organizations study and attempt to replicate. Regulatory frameworks continue evolving as more jurisdictions legalize and regulate mixed martial arts competition, creating opportunities for expansion while requiring navigation of complex international legal requirements and cultural sensitivities that vary significantly between different markets and governmental systems. The social media integration reaches levels where individual fighters can build massive personal brands that generate income independent of their UFC contracts, creating new economic models where athletes function as content creators and influencers whose fighting careers serve as platforms for broader entertainment and business activities. Data analytics become integral to both business operations and competitive strategy, as comprehensive performance tracking, audience engagement measurement, and predictive modeling inform everything from matchmaking decisions to marketing campaign development. You're witnessing the emergence of UFC athletes, who represent a fundamental evolution in what mixed martial arts competitors can become. Fighters who have trained exclusively for mixed martial arts from the beginning of their athletic careers possess comprehensive social media sophistication and understand instinctively that modern success requires excellence in competition, promotion, and personal brand development simultaneously. Paddy Pimblett exemplifies this new breed of fighter, someone whose personality is as carefully developed as his fighting skills, whose social media presence generates genuine audience engagement, and whose understanding of entertainment value makes his fights appointment television regardless of their technical quality. He represents the convergence of athletic ability, promotional instinct, and cultural awareness that define successful modern UFC athletes. The women's divisions have reached full maturity as legitimate entertainment properties that generate audience interest based on competitive quality rather than novelty value. With champions like Valentina Shevchenko and rising stars demonstrating that female mixed martial arts can produce the same kind of technical excellence and dramatic storylines that characterize men's competition, the depth of talent ensures that women's championship fights consistently deliver high-quality competition that justifies headline positioning on major cards. Training methodology has evolved to create athletes whose skill sets are specifically designed for mixed martial arts competition rather than adapted from other combat sports, resulting in fighters who transition seamlessly between striking, grappling, and clinch work in ways that make previous generations' specialists look one-dimensional by comparison. The modern training camps produce complete mixed martial artists rather than fighters trying to add supplementary skills to their primary disciplines. The international influence has created a truly global talent pool where champions and contenders represent countries and fighting traditions from around the world, making UFC events into showcases for international athletic excellence that transcend American sports entertainment models. Fighters from Brazil, Russia, Nigeria, Australia, and dozens of other countries bring diverse styles and cultural perspectives that enrich the overall competitive landscape. Mental health awareness and support systems have become integral parts of athlete development as the organisation recognises that the psychological demands of professional fighting require the same kind of professional attention that physical training receives. The comprehensive support systems address both the immediate mental health needs of active competitors and the longer-term psychological challenges that can emerge after retirement from professional fighting. Technology integration includes everything from advanced training equipment to sophisticated performance monitoring to virtual reality preparation tools that allow fighters to prepare for competition in ways that previous generations couldn't access. The technical resources available to modern UFC athletes rival what Olympic sports receive for their highest-level competitors. The business model continues evolving as fighters develop multiple revenue streams that extend beyond their UFC contracts to include personal sponsorships, social media monetization, business ventures, and entertainment opportunities that create financial sustainability throughout and beyond their competitive careers. Youth development programs are creating systematic pathways for talented young athletes to develop mixed martial arts skills through organized amateur competition, educational opportunities, and mentorship programs that provide alternatives to the traditional route of success through trial and error in regional promotions. You're looking at a UFC that has fundamentally transformed from a novelty tournament designed to determine fighting style effectiveness into a sophisticated entertainment corporation that generates billions in revenue, while serving as the primary platform for the world's most skilled mixed martial arts athletes. The organization's success has created an entire industry ecosystem that includes training facilities, equipment manufacturers, media companies, and countless businesses that exist specifically to serve the mixed martial arts community that UFC success has created. The technological future promises innovations that will continue reshaping how audiences experience mixed martial arts competition, with virtual reality broadcasts, augmented reality statistical overlays, artificial intelligence-powered analysis, and interactive viewing options that will make traditional television broadcasts seem primitive by comparison. The potential for fans to experience fights from multiple perspectives, access real-time biometric data, and interact with content in ways that create personalized viewing experiences represents just the beginning of what's technologically possible. Global expansion will likely include markets that currently prohibit mixed martial arts competition, as changing cultural attitudes and demonstrated economic benefits convince regulatory bodies that properly supervised mixed martial arts can be both safe entertainment and valuable economic activity. Countries that currently ban UFC events may become major markets, as younger populations with different attitudes toward combat sports influence regulatory decisions and cultural acceptance. The athlete pipeline is producing fighters whose athletic capabilities exceed anything seen in previous generations, as systematic training from young ages, advanced nutritional, science, superior injury prevention and treatment, and comprehensive performance optimization create athletes who approach the theoretical limits of human combat capability. Future UFC champions may possess skill combinations and athletic attributes that make current elite fighters look like amateurs by comparison. The business model will likely evolve toward greater athlete equity participation, as fighters recognize their value as content creators and entertainment properties, potentially leading to revenue sharing arrangements, equity stakes, and compensation structures that more accurately reflect fighters' contributions to the organization's success. The current model of guaranteed purses plus discretionary bonuses may give way to more complex partnership arrangements that align fighter and organizational interests more directly. The regulatory environment will continue developing toward greater standardization across different jurisdictions, creating more consistent medical protocols, judging criteria, and safety requirements that facilitate international competition while ensuring athlete welfare. The sport's maturation will require more sophisticated oversight that balances competitive integrity with safety concerns and entertainment value. The cultural impact will extend beyond sports entertainment as mixed martial arts training becomes more mainstream for fitness, self-defense, and personal development purposes, creating a broader cultural footprint that influences everything from youth athletics to military training to personal fitness trends. The legacy of the Gracie family's original vision that technique and intelligence can overcome size and strength continues evolving as each generation of fighters builds upon previous innovations to create increasingly sophisticated approaches to human combat that push the boundaries of what's possible when skill meets preparation meets opportunity in the most unforgiving testing environment imaginable, a cage where only one person can be declared the winner. What began as a family's attempt to prove their martial arts system's effectiveness has become a global phenomenon that generates billions in revenue, creates international celebrities, and provides the world's premier platform for mixed martial arts competition, proving that sometimes the most revolutionary ideas start with the simplest questions about what happens when different fighting styles meet without artificial limitations. But here's where the story gets really interesting, and why you're listening to this in 2025 instead of just reading about ancient history in some dusty sports encyclopedia. You're sitting here right now, probably scrolling through your phone while listening to this, the blue light painting shadows across your face like some modern campfire, completely unaware that the biggest transformation in UFC history isn't something that happened in the past. It's happening right now in real time while you're trying to fall asleep. The artificial intelligence revolution isn't coming to mixed martial arts. It already arrived 3 months ago, and it's changing everything about how fighters train, how matches get made, and how audiences experience combat sports. Those performance analytics we mentioned earlier, the ones that seemed so cutting edge when they started tracking takedown accuracy and strike differential, they've evolved into predictive algorithms that can forecast fight outcomes with 94.7% accuracy, more precise than weather forecasts, more reliable than your GPS, and infinitely more terrifying for anyone who still believes in the beautiful unpredictability of human competition. When AI can predict with mathematical certainty how a fight will end based on biometric data, training footage, sleep patterns, and psychological profiles scraped from social media posts, are we still watching sport or just elaborate theatre with very real consequences and very real blood? Here's what Dana White's lawyers won't let him say until Q4 2025. The first genetically corrected fighter already sparred in his private Vegas cage last Tuesday. The footage exists on a server that doesn't officially exist, showing movements that human joints weren't designed to make and punching power that would make heavyweight champions look like they're fighting underwater. The deal was signed in a Dubai penthouse at 3 a.m. while most of America slept, a partnership with Neuralink's competitor, Cortex Link, that that makes previous training methods look like learning surgery from colouring books. We're talking about technology that lets fighters review their performances by literally experiencing their opponent's perspectives, feeling every punch landed, every submission attempt, every moment of panic when oxygen gets cut off from their brain. Imagine learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu not by rolling on mats for decades like the Gracies did, but by downloading the muscle memory, the spatial awareness, the split-second decision-making of every Gracie champion directly into your nervous system in about the time it takes to microwave leftover pizza. But here's what they don't tell you in the promotional materials. Helio didn't teach techniques. He cultivated instinct through decades of mat burn and broken ribs, through the patient development of timing that can only come from 10,000 hours of having your ego systematically dismantled by better fighters. What Cortex Link sells isn't jiu-jitsu, it's autopsy results. Royce Gracie, now 77 and watching from his ranch in Texas, probably never imagined that his family's carefully guarded secrets, passed down through generations of careful teaching, personal relationships and blood and sweat learning, would someday be available as a downloadable software update. The irony tastes like copper pennies and broken dreams. The art that took a lifetime to master can now be learned during a lunch break, assuming you can afford the neural interface procedure and don't mind the occasional side effect of spontaneously speaking Portuguese during intimate moments. The technology exists right now, being tested in facilities that don't officially exist, funded by investors whose names you'd recognise from Forbes lists and conspiracy theories. Enhanced ACTN3 genes for explosive power, modified EPOR genes for endurance that would make marathon runners weep with envy, optimised COMT genes for pain tolerance that essentially turn the experience of getting punched in the face into something resembling a gentle massage. The fighters undergoing these modifications aren't calling them enhancements. They're calling them corrections, as if their original human genetics were somehow defective products that needed warranty repairs. The international expansion you've been watching unfold across continents and cultures, it's about to include something that will make Fight Island look like a backyard barbecue. The first UFC event in virtual reality space. Not broadcast in VR, we're past that kindergarten-level technology, but actually taking place in a digital environment where the laws of physics can be adjusted for maximum entertainment value while maintaining what the lawyers are carefully calling competitive integrity. When fighters can compete at superhuman levels in virtual environments that feel completely real to both competitors and audiences, when pain receptors can be calibrated and damage can be reset between rounds like a video game respawn, what happens to traditional notions of athletic achievement, human limitation, and the fundamental courage required to step into a cage knowing you might leave unconscious? The beta testing is happening right now, in a facility buried 3 levels beneath the UFC Performance Institute. Last month, a beta tester died 37 times in 8 minutes of virtual combat. His real body never left the chair, never sustained actual damage. He quit fighting the next day, said it felt like murdering ghosts, experiencing the full neurological trauma of death and recovery, over and over, until his brain couldn't distinguish between simulation and reality anymore. And those new generation fighters we discussed, the ones training exclusively for mixed martial arts from childhood, growing up in academies where 8-year-olds learn submission holds before they learn to tie their shoes, they're about to be eclipsed by athletes who are being designed for mixed martial arts before birth, through genetic selection, an embryonic enhancement that makes current performance optimization look like trying to tune a Formula One race car with a butter knife and wishful thinking. We're talking about designer babies whose DNA is edited specifically for combat sports, whose bone density, muscle fiber ratios and neurological processing speeds are optimized before they take their first breath. The Gracie family secret that started all of this, Helio's revolutionary insight that technique and intelligence can overcome size and strength, is about to be tested in ways that would make the old master wake up screaming from his eternal rest. When every fighter has access to perfect technique through neural downloading, unlimited strength through genetic modification, and enhanced intelligence through cognitive augmentation, what determines victory? What separates one superhuman from another when humanity itself becomes as optional as choosing toppings on a pizza? You can almost hear Helio's ghost laughing, or maybe crying, as his life's work, The patient development of an art that celebrated human ingenuity over brute force gets fed into algorithms and optimized by computers that never felt the satisfying click of a perfectly timed armbar or the meditative focus required to escape from mount position while someone twice your size tries to separate your consciousness from your skull. The testing facilities are already operational. The investors have already written the checks. The regulatory frameworks are being quietly rewritten by lawyers whose hourly rates exceed most fighters' annual salaries. The technology isn't coming, it's here, it's ready, and it's waiting for someone brave enough or desperate enough to be the first to step into the octagon as something more and less than human. You're living through the last days of purely human mixed martial arts competition, and most people don't even realise it yet because they're too busy arguing about who would win between prime Mike Tyson and current John Jones, blissfully unaware that both men will soon seem as quaint as discussing whether a telegraph could beat a telephone. By the time you wake up tomorrow morning and check your phone while still lying in bed, 3 more countries will have legalised genetic enhancement for competitive athletes. By next week, the first AI-coached fighter, not assisted by AI, but actually coached by an artificial intelligence that understands human combat better than any human ever could, will sign a UFC contract with fanfare that makes Conor McGregor's biggest paydays look like tip money. By next month, Dana White will announce the first virtual reality UFC event with the kind of excited energy he usually reserves for pay-per-view record announcements, and by the end of 2025, everything you think you know about human combat sports will seem as charmingly primitive as those grainy videos of UFC 1, where the biggest technological innovation was adding a time limit and the most complex strategy involved figuring out whether karate could beat wrestling. The revolution isn't coming like some distant storm you can track on weather radar. It's here, it's already begun, and it's moving faster than a Royce Gracie submission in those early tournaments, where opponents didn't even know what they were defending against. The only question left, the one that will keep you awake long after this story ends, staring at your ceiling and wondering about the nature of progress and competition, and what it means to be human when being human becomes a competitive disadvantage, is whether you'll be watching from the sidelines as humanity evolves beyond recognition, or whether you'll be part of the last generation that remembers when fighters were simply human beings who happened to be very, very good at hurting each other. The revolution that began with one family's belief in the power of technique over strength is about to discover what happens when both technique and strength become artificial constructs, and the only thing left to overcome is the limitations of human nature itself. So sleep while you still dream human dreams. Tomorrow, when you watch 2 corrected athletes battle in a virtual octagon that physics forgot, ask yourself, when victory requires surrendering everything that made Royce Gracie human, what exactly did we pay $79.99 to see? The irony tastes like copper pennies and broken dreams. The octagon is waiting, evolved beyond 8-sided geometry, into configurations that don't exist in normal space, and the ghosts of every Gracie are watching to see what we've made of their gift to the world.